Anyway, yeah, this is MIIC Talks. We are a team of three: Laura, our friend Lewis, and myself, Omar, and we are doing this for the course of for a course called Chef de Projet, which is about basically leading a project, managing a project, and then we are the podcast team. So we conduct interviews with professionals, and you are one of these professionals today.
Ooh, that sounds fun. That sounds like a
Yes,
yeah.
Yeah.
sorry, te interrumpí. Yeah, so like we're running this podcast for the MIIC Talks, and we look for interesting people working in the arts or in culture industries, and I thought of you as a great example, as someone who's jumped from different paths, career paths, and reinvented himself, and as a friend. So yeah, the idea is just to peek into your experience and your journey as a creator and anything that you want to share with people who are like aspiring to follow this path or a similar creative path.
Okay. So should I tell you guys a little bit about my background and everything and like how I started?
Yes. Yeah, so yeah, feel free to introduce yourself however you want to.
Yes.
Okay. I'm Nico Blanco. I am a producer and director based here in LA. For the time being, who knows if LA will be here for very long. But
Yeah, true.
I always wanted to be a filmmaker, like growing up, but like as I feel like you must know and like find that relatable to Laura Daniela. Like I don't think that felt like a possibility where we came from, really. The idea
Right.
of like, oh, I'll make movies for a living. Like that sounds like who does that? Like not real people do that. So then when I decided to go to school, I didn't really quite understand what I wanted, so I went to business school. And then I ended up
Okay.
graduating in finance and marketing, and I minored in film and math. And I landed my first job, which was as an analyst at Morgan Stanley in New York in investment banking. And that's when I realized, because it was my first real job, I was like, oh. Your life is your job. Like this is my life now, and this will be my career path and like what I'm gonna grow up to be, and the people I'm around is who I'm gonna become. And I hated that. I really didn't want to do um, so I was there for very little, like quite literally under 6 months. And I remember wanting to quit and talking several times to my manager. And my manager was always like, you can't quit. You're doing investment banking in Morgan Stanley in New York, how hard it was to get here, how many people wanted to do this. And I was like, okay. And then one day I was like, I can't. And he was like, why? Like it's the pay will get better, like you'll be less exploited once you like begin getting promoted. And I was like, I don't want your life. I don't want the life of anyone around me. I can't. And then I switched to advertising. So I landed this job at Havas, which was like this French advertising company, Havas. And it's also in New York. I started doing public relations for them and like advertising. And even though that was nice, that was right before the election of Trump and the first term.
Mhm.
And once he got elected, there was like a major policy switch in a lot of the companies. And they said that they wouldn't like do work sponsored visas for like entry level jobs anymore, which was what my position was. I was like just starting as an uh right there. And I was like, well, I'm not really that interested in advertising. I think if I'm just here to do it and I'm not even gonna like stay or grow in this company, I don't really want to stay. So I switched again. And then I started working at this WeWork for this like social media startup. And while I was at WeWork, which I quite liked, is that you're constantly meeting like other people who are doing like freelance work and independent work. And I met this like producer that was like working on this like films and like in commercials. And he was like, "Oh, you have like a good eye." I edited a commercial for him, and he was like started hiring me more. And I was like, that's when I learned that regular people do this. Like I was like, oh, like I can do what he's doing. Like I can do this. Like I am like they're not like different or special. Like you just have to want to do it, and then you can like find a path. So when I started like working with him is like when I was like, okay, what I'm gonna do is like I wanna be a filmmaker. This is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. This is like I am gonna pursue this. I've always wanted to. I just need to do it. Um, so I started working with him there for a while. He couldn't also sponsor my visa, so I was at the end of like 6 more months. I ended up returning to Colombia. And once I returned to Colombia, well, my background was still like in business. That's what I went to school for and stuff. And my whole family was like, I had like interviewed at BCG and I interviewed like a bunch of places, and they were like, "Why are you not wanting to go? Why don't you want to take these jobs?" And I was like, "Cause I want to be a filmmaker and I can't be a filmmaker." And they're like, "You're crazy." So my family was really upset at me. But then I started like meeting just putting myself out there. So I just like started taking companies with production meetings with production companies. I started like taking meetings with anyone I knew. I would talk to all of my friends and be like, "Do you know like anyone who's in film?" And I ended up meeting this first assistant director who was writing her first script and wanted to like direct it, and she was like looking for an independent producer. She wanted to produce it independently, and I read it. I quite liked it, and I was like, "This is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna make this movie happen." So me and like two other like now really good friends like just were like, okay, let's make this movie happen. And we started fundraising for it independently. We started like talking to other production companies, like applying to government funds. Um, we ended up like able to be being able to raise all of the funds and like make the movie happen quite scrappily because you always try to find like a way. The background in finance and management like came really handy in there. Like I do think it's a skill that I still use to this day. And yeah, we raised the money, we shot it, and we premiered in movie theaters in 2020, early 2020, before everything collapsed. So at least it got out to be like in movie theaters properly. And while I was doing that, since I knew that that's what I wanted, I wanted to I was like, I'm gonna go to school for this because I mean, I wanted and but I want to also like sharpen my skills and like I want to be a better filmmaker. So I applied to several MFAs, like Masters in Fine Arts, and I got into NYU, Columbia, and AFI, which is the American Film Institute. It's a conservatory program, so you're there like creating all the time. It's not like regular grad school. Like you're just making constantly things because it's conservatory. So you're always like shooting every weekend. You're always writing all the time. You're always giving feedback to each other. You're like taking acting classes and like directing each other. And like you're always just doing things more than just like the theoretical components of it. Um, and I decided to go. I went luckily with there's this program back home called Futuro, which is like a they call it a scholarship, but it's a loan. So they're like lending you the money to go to school. But it is without it, I couldn't have gone. So like I applied to it, especially because back then, like my family was like, they were like, he lost his mind. Like, I can't believe this is what's happening to him. Um, and then I came to LA. I moved. I went to grad school. Well, I think an important thing is to always be like aware and open to opportunities that present themselves. So, because I had never done documentary, for example, and when I was like in here in grad school, I met this documentary filmmaker that had been working about this like had been working like 8 to 10 years almost because of footage of like where he had been living with um how do you call this like human traffickers pretty much people like moving people from Gaza into and the West Bank into Israel to work like at immigrant jobs like construction sites like washing things like just like low wage immigrant jobs, and he'd be living on and off with them for over like 8 years. And he had all this footage, and then I talked to him. We moved in together for a while, and we're like, okay, let's make this a movie. And I started like story editing his movie, and I became a consulting producer in his movie. And then That was my first documentary feature. We premiered at TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival, and we did like a really good, had a really good, solid, strong like festival life. Um, then you start realizing that things are more complicated than that because of the subject matter, also people were kind of like it did well in festivals, but people are also kind of like scared to distribute it. And then after that, we did really well. But like for example, right now, I think right now might be a good time to start going off again to distribution. Because like right before this, no one wanted to touch it with a 10-foot pole. Like it's a complicated movie to distribute at the time being. Um, but like that's when I was like, oh, I also like documentary. So like since then I graduated. And when I graduated, I did another indie feature here in the US and I started working in multiple documentary projects because then I also started like learning that documentary, it's like you just like roll up your sleeves and start shooting and start doing things. And you can shoot like little by little without necessarily having to raise the $2 million first. You're like doing it throughout an extended amount of time and you're like shooting as you're going. Um, and I find it like quite fascinating. Like now, half of my projects right now are documentary. I'm doing one called House of Leather, which is about like this commune by like the leather like artist and like Tom of Finland. He used to live in a commune here, and like it's about the people who like live there now and go through this like radical sexual practice of art making and like how that affects their lives. And I'm also doing this documentary about immigration in the Darien Gap, I've been like living there on and off for the past year, just like seeing how this migration path has completely disrupted like the indigenous tribes that used to live there, and how like even that affects like all of this nature and all of these things we had weren't really aware, and where we're losing like all of this like indigenous knowledge because of that. Um, and I'm doing another documentary called Born to be Kissed in the Dark, which is about the role of like the underground in queer community building. And it just follows like this underground, people who've been throwing parties here for 40 years in LA, and the group of like trans women and men who host those events. And yeah, still directing on my own things when I can and working. So been doing a couple of shorts this year. New Fest has given me some money to shoot again. And after that, just taking some time to focus on like writing and delivering my feature, which some people are expecting it by June. So I'm moving to the beach to just write after I'm done with this short. Because it's very easy to lose track of your own projects when you're doing everyone else's projects. So I was like, okay, I'm just taking some time off and I'm moving out of LA and just focusing on this for a second. Okay, I talked a lot. I said a
Yeah,
lot.
no, no, it's good. It gives us
Yeah, it's
meat
good.
content.
Yes.
Um, I just had like a question. It sounds like there's a lot of overlapping, right, between projects. How do you
Yes.
manage to like coordinate, and how many do you have? How many are you working on at the same time? Two, three,
Oh,
four, or how do you make it?
it's crazy. It's the most exhausting part, I think, of all of it, of like anyone who works like as a producer. It's easier as a director because you're tackling one thing at a time. But when you're
Mhm.
producing, you are expected to like do multiple projects at once.
Mm.
And it's easier and harder depending on what you do. Because like when you have, for example, this Darien Gap one, like the teams are always quite small when I'm doing documentary. So like when it's the producer who's financing the project, like so the executive producer will like get the money, will like choose a date, I'll coordinate like travel and like arrangements for me, the director, the cinematographer, the sound person. And it's usually
Mhm.
a four-person team. It's quite small. And then we're on the ground shooting, doing all these things. The day to
Mhm.
day is kind of crazy, but it's quite contained. But when you're like doing a narrative project, like a fiction project or like a commercial or anything like that, teams can range from anything. And I work in independent, so they're much smaller than if they were
Mhm.
like a fully commercial feature. So like I would be running a team of like probably 45 to 80 people on set. So it's a lot of like moving pieces all the time. The prep is really extensive. Days on set are like 13 to 16 hours usually, and you're just shooting for days at a time. So you're going crazy. And then you're like, while you're shooting there, you're like, okay, I'm still gonna send emails and try to have a meeting with a financier to raise money for that other project and see what happens. And sometimes the unfortunate thing happened, which is like I don't know, the opportunity presents itself for two things you've been working on,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to choose, which is so sad sometimes. It's like, oh
Yes.
no, like this person wants to give me money to shoot this project, but I have to shoot it at the same date in which I was planning to do this other thing, and you quite literally just have to choose. Um, and I think trying to balance that with being stable is perhaps the most difficult thing because like you're doing all these things, but all those things don't quite pay while you're doing them most of the time. Because most of the time, what's paying is like no, like commercial or I still do like I did a home renovation show for like Discovery Channel or like things that you're not quite interested in doing for artistic purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so you need to balance your time between doing that and doing this ones. And I don't know if you guys know, but the industry in LA has been kind of crazy for the past 3 years. Because
Actually, sorry,
yeah,
no, that was just one of the topics we wanted to cover. Like
yeah, I
how
can.
has it been moving to LA and if it has
Well,
opened
LA has
opportunities for
been
you.
Yeah,
So,
LA has been great. I can't really complain because despite all the madness, I've managed to be doing what I'm doing, which I'm excited about. But it has been really crazy in terms of like where the industry has been and what's happened to it. There's been a big contraction in production here in general. Like everyone's shooting a lot less. People are moving out of the city. Um, and people are really worried right now because the like 2 years ago we had the writer's strike, which fully support the writer's strike, give everyone like fair pay, like there's
mhm.
no need for like like literally the CEO to be making over $100 million and the writer's not getting paid properly. Like that makes no sense to me of Netflix.
Of course.
So I'm like pay people what they like. It's a job. Like it's sure it's a creative job, but it's still a job. People need to be paid for it. But the writer's strike went for a long time. So that was like almost like from June to like almost 8 months, like almost a full year of the strike. So there were like very little jobs. That's when I started like fully focusing on documentary for a while. Um, but there were very, very little jobs. I was very fortunate that at the time had a first look deal, which means it's a development deal with Searchlight Pictures, which used to be previously Fox Searchlight. Now it belongs to Disney. And it was really nice because it gave me stability. I was getting paid, but all of my projects were like on standby. Like you couldn't write a new draft, you couldn't do anything because everyone's on strike. And even if I were like talking to my writer, like I'm not even supposed to be talking to him, kind of. So I was like, okay, like all the projects were paused. That was very difficult. Then after that, I had, do you want to come in and get something? Sorry, I think laptop. Sure, go, go. My roommate,
No worries.
no.
Uh,
So the strike was quite challenging, as I was mentioning. And it was challenging for a lot of people, like for everyone, and it was very disheartening. Like if news started getting leaked out, for example, of like who was it? Was it Bob Cazell from Disney? Like who were saying like people were like, let's not negotiate with the writers. Like once the writers are unable to do their mortgage payments and start losing their jobs, we'll see if they want to keep on striking. And we're
ah,
like, but like I think the filmmakers really united and came together, which was quite nice to see. LA, even though people say it's a very um, like lonely city, it's actually I think quite community driven. Like you would go to coffee shops, and if you're like if you have a WGA card, if you're a writer, if anything, you wouldn't have to like pay for your coffee, or you wouldn't have to like businesses
mm,
were trying to help people in a way.
mm,
And then after we signed that, well, after the writers signed the strike and the strike was over, we went through an industry contraction that was larger even than the strike because the model of the like all of the studios, because of what Netflix caused as a disruption, really more than the way that films are distributed online, is that most studios started being handled like a technology company instead of
mm,
like a filmmaking company. So suddenly, like studios were producing like millions upon millions upon millions worth of dollars of content, just of a bunch of competing
Mm.
platforms, and none of them were like actually like profitable. Um,
Mhm.
so like it created this huge bubble, and after the writer's strike, like it popped. Like they were like, we can't produce the content we've been producing. So it was like something crazy. It was like from we lost like 40% of production compared to the year before. Because like the amount of content being produced was like just unsustainable. Like everyone was producing unsustainably. And so we had that major contraction, which was last year. And then everyone was like, 2025 is the year. But then these fires are happening right now. And we're like wondering what this will do to the industry as a whole as well. Because
Got
a
it.
lot of like independent filmmaking and stuff relies on like private equity. Like it's like rich people giving you money for projects because they think they're cool or they want to support them or they want equity in them. But a lot of those financiers quite literally lost their houses and we're just waiting to see what this means for the year as a whole. I think everyone's a little bit on edge right now.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, to
Wow.
see what it means. Um, but sorry, I don't even know if I answered the question. I was just went on talking.
No,
What was the question even? I
um,
also forgot.
we read somewhere that you won something related to Pixar.
No, not Pixar. I was like, yeah, it was called the Imaginar residency, which
Hmm.
Hmm.
was they chose like particularly Hispanic and Latino producers.
Hmm.
And you would apply, it's film independent. Oh, okay. I would love to mention that. Like there's a lot of the way that filmmaking was here, because there's no public funding for the arts in the US. There just really isn't. That doesn't exist like in the rest of the world where um I don't know, there's public funds to shoot and create film and art and stuff like that, which like a lot of like time people are like, I don't know, you talk to people here and everyone is like, well, that doesn't exist because we're like the only film business that's like actually profitable, so we do not
Mm.
need public funding. And I was like, no, 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 you're missing the point. It's like everywhere there's private financing for films. But public funding exists because there's a value in creating art beyond the commerciality of it. Beyond it being commercial, there's value to creating art. For example, if like French cinema, a lot of the times is like trying to explore and analyze French ideals of viewing the world and like putting them out there through film. And that's why they use their public financing for. So their films have to be quite French and or like try to say something interesting in order to like get that financing. But it's not because their film industry is not profitable. Like France has a very profitable film industry, but it's because there's certain movies that deserve to be made regardless of their profitability.
Okay.
But people don't seem to get that here because like here everything's a business. It's LA. You're told like from day one, like if you have a hobby, monetize it, see how you make money of it. Um,
Okay.
so there's no public financing for that. So the way that independent film works, which is like just the root of like the art house films and everything that exists in the US, which is still quite a lot, is all private, but it's also all supported by like nonprofit companies that are trying to support private independent filmmakers. So between them, you have like Film Independent, which is a big one. You have Gotham Institute. You have the Sundance Labs. You have like a lot of like things that are supporting independent filmmaking.
Hmm.
So amongst them, it's the Film Independent one was doing this residency called Imaginar, which I got. Which what they did was they saw your slate of like when you're producing things, you're doing multiple projects like we talked before. So they see all of your slate of projects and like all the things you're doing, what you want to do, where you are with them. So I submitted the projects I have, the scripts, the attachments, like with this director, with this writer, and like who's interested in what. And they were partnering with Searchlight to select like three producers they believed were like ready to make the jump to also commercial filmmaking because there's like a bridge between independent and commercial. And ideally, once you do commercial filmmaking, you could do like a little bit of a more stable life because you're like, oh, I'll do a commercial film and then I'll do an independent film because now I'm still like I have the money from that. Um, And they selected three of us. They gave us like mentorship, development, and like they paid us like the first year $50,000, and the second year they paid us a little bit more. And what you were like, well, it was going to be 1 year only, but because of the strikes and everything, and we just like they liked us, I guess. They gave us we ended up having a 2 year deal with Searchlight in which we were like developing our films.
Wow.
Um, and yeah, so that's pretty much what it was. It went really well. It was really nice to have Disney as a backing institution when you're developing with Searchlight is completely different than when you're developing on your own. Like it's like you call any agent and they're gonna pick up. So that's really nice. So you're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that'd be nice to like see if this actor is interested or this director is interested. There was a director that I quite enjoyed that did this movie called Mud that came out in Sundance 2 years ago. And I was like, oh, he'd be perfect for this film. So you just like pick up your phone, you call the manager is like, yeah, like send me the script. So much easier than when it's just you trying to
Mm-hmm.
convince the manager why the script is worth it. They're like, no, it's a Searchlight thing. Of course, we'll have a look. So that's really nice.
Nice.
Uh, so yeah, that was what the project was, and it did lead to this like 2 year first look deal that I had with them, which was really, really nice. Really hard to get anything done in that structure, I do believe. I still think independent filmmaker, it might be because I know it better, but it just seems more, I understand it better. Like you just need to want to make it and then you start raising funds. But when you become attached with a studio, like
Mm-hmm.
there's gonna be like 40 people who need to read the script and everyone's gonna have their notes and everyone's gonna have their take and everyone's gonna be like, should we greenlight it? Should we not greenlight it? It's like a much more grueling process, but you are getting paid through that process, which does not happen when you're doing things independently. So that's nice.
I
Um,
guess it's like when you work with a startup and when you work with a corporate job. So like you sense that difference,
Yes. The
maybe.
other one is like, yeah, yeah. When you're like with a startup, it's like the team's smaller. It also feels flatter. Like
Mm-hmm.
the distance is like a not that high, the hierarchy. Like it's just a way flatter hierarchy. When you're corporate, there's like just like 17 million people on top of you, and they're all gonna this guy's gonna have to pitch it to his boss, and his boss is gonna have to pitch it to his boss, and they're
Yeah.
all gonna have like different takes and notes and everything. So it takes a long time to do anything in the studio system. And it costs a lot of money. Um, so just like because it's part of the studio, like just everything is a lot more expensive to make, everything, which is something that I learned. I was like, oh, they were like, if I make this movie independently, I think I could make it for like $3 million. If I'm doing it with a studio, it'd have to be a $20 million movie just because the
Mm.
costs grow so exponentially. Um,
Yeah.
so that was also very interesting to learn. Um, but then after the chaos for the past 3 years, I've just been, like I mentioned, this year I was like, I'm gonna focus on my own things. I'm gonna try to put pause in most things. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing this short that I'm getting that I'm quite excited to be shooting. It'll be really fun and sexy and sad, which I love that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll be just writing for 2 months because the plan is to go to Mexico to just shoot this perhaps at the end of the year, this feature that I'm reading. Would be nice. But
Okay. I just want to say, like, this thing is gonna cut in 5 minutes, but we can sign in again, I guess.
yeah, the same
Does
link,
that
right?
usually work? Yeah, I
Yeah.
guess so. I forgot. Maybe Omar has a question to share, and then
Um,
we can, I don't know. Mhm.
yeah, I wanted to ask like a pretty cliche question, but I find it always interesting to ask people.
Mhm.
Um, if there is someone who is living or dead who you could collaborate with, whatever name it is,
Oh God.
who would it be? It can be
Wow.
anything. It doesn't have to be a
Okay.
filmmaker. It can be a musician. It can be a, I don't know, you know, president.
That is so tough. Um, mm, who I could collaborate. I do think of like, I mean, it's kind of basic that I think that, but I do think of filmmakers, which is boring. And I'm thinking of a live one right now that I quite enjoy. There's this woman, this producer who's a woman who at the
Mhm.
time was one of she started in the early 90s, and everything she does, I think it's amazing. And I would love for her to shepherd one of my projects because I know I would learn and it would make me way better. Her name is Christine Vachon. She's based in New York. She has this company called Killer Films. And I think she's just such a badass. Like, she always makes quite transgressive, provocative movies and like does so like commercially somehow. I don't quite understand. She's the one who at the beginning produced this movie like Kids. I don't know if you guys saw Kids, which is like it's the movie that had like Chloe Sevigny like as a child. And it was like, well, for your reference to you, Laura Daniela, like this is kind of like La Vendedora de Rosas, in which they took like
Mm.
the way the filmmaker shot it is like they found this group of kids like living like rebelliously, and it was like a mixture of fiction and well, it is a fiction film like La Vendedora de Rosas, but they're using characters that are kind of being themselves. They're all like non-actors.
Okay.
Um, and they just like follow these kids in the West Village when the West Village was still like not just a shopping mall in New York. And so, and they just followed them and told this incredibly depressing, bleak story about like AIDS and like substance abuse at an early age and all these things.
Yeah.
But I saw that and I was like, wow, I can't believe people can make things like that. And she also is like shepherding like Todd Haynes from the very beginning. She did Todd Haynes' first film, which was called Poison, which was experimental film with like not a real plot per se, just like ideas, just dreamy ideals, all of it super homoerotic, all of it. And I'm like, how did you finance that? I just don't understand how she can privately finance the things she finances. And it's always very, very cool what she's doing. And now she still works with the same people as well, doing like big like commercial films. She did Todd Haynes' last movie called May December with like Natalie Portman and Julianne Moore. And that obviously is like a big, big film, but she's also like investing a lot in like up and coming voices and like I think it's someone whose career I aspire to have something similar to. So I would love to just be able to talk to her. Um, she seems like a terrifying person, to be honest, but that's always interesting. Uh,
Why? Like in what sense terrifying?
oh, especially because I mean, she was a producer woman in the 90s in New York, so she's like no bullshit a little bit. She's very direct. She's a scary person. I think Christine
Okay.
Bush, but I still would love to learn or have the opportunity to collaborate with her. Um, also,
Hopefully, she will see this interview and she'll contact you afterwards.
oh my God,
She'll
Christine,
reach out, imagine.
always.
Yeah.
I have the perfect script for you. Well, I'll have it in 2 months, but please call me. I love her. I think she's amazing. Other than filmmakers, um, I don't know, just someone who will teach me how to meditate and ground myself because I think I am looking to do that in my life. So perhaps that someone will teach me like, I don't know, like this is. Sure, like working in film is great, but sometimes you're so worried about things you shouldn't be worried. Like, let's focus on having a more grounded, mindful life. So,
Well, I think that sounds a lot like David Lynch, no? Considering like he was
oh,
like,
I would have loved to hang out with David, who's
yeah,
like now a person who passed, I guess. That is
right,
really.
right.
Uh,
Yeah.
Also, I do think that if you're hanging out with him, most of the time he'd be like speaking in riddles, and I'd be like, what does he mean by that? But that seems very interesting, like incredibly interesting dinner party.
Something about like, what did you say about documentaries and stuff like that?
What is it?
No,
Oh, yeah,
I
yeah.
think you said,
I wanted to ask you because you've worked on short films, you worked in fiction and in documentary. And is there like a field you prefer between those three, or, it's based on the project?
I think it's based on the project. I think, particularly for fiction, I think you have to love it because it's always a pain. So that one always you just have to love. Documentary is just really exciting. I love making documentary. I think it requires someone with like a little bit of an adventurous spirit and like trying to um just be able to always be on your feet, like taking in as things go, because you never really know what's happening when you're shooting a documentary. You have an idea of what you want to shoot, and then real life happens, and it's different than what you expected.
Mhm.
So it's always very exciting. There's one in the Darien Gap, like that was. It's been really like you're just exploring things. I've been living with like indigenous tribes. I was like when you're like in the Gulf, for example, which was quite shocking to me, like you have to ask for permission to like the cartel that runs that area just so you can be there because they need to like know, and there's like checkpoints and um
Just
it's
like to maybe
time.
give context, no? Like, the Darien Gap is an area in Colombia, and
Yeah, yeah. The Darien Gap is the jungle between like Colombia and Panama. It's a migrant crossing that started right after the peace treaty with the FARC was like signed, kinda, because before that, it would used to just be a drug trafficking route that the cartels would be running, and then peace was signed, and then that became open, kind of. So people started migrating through it. And last year, it was going to be the first year that it almost reached 1 million migrants a year. Like it's a lot of people migrating a year now. And it really escalated with which people don't know, with social media. That's when it became really big, like with TikTok particularly. People started recording themselves passing, and people were like, well, I can do that. And they don't realize it's one of the most dangerous crossings in the world. Like it's actually, so people die constantly crossing, but they go also completely unprepared because they saw it on social media and think it's not that bad. Um, but yeah, I've learned a lot. You feel like you're doing something like of importance when you're doing those kinds of things. So that's always really nice about documentary. Um, it's also quite grounding, like, and to be able to see people's lives and the privilege of telling their story, and then you're like, oh, like for example, I was gonna be shooting next week in Mexico City for my underground nightlife documentary, and I lost funding of it like last minute for this particular shoot. And I was like, which usually I would have like spiraled and being like, no, why? I really want, this was really important, this was whatever. And now I'm like, okay, I guess I'll go to Mexico City, do some work there, and like I'll enjoy my time. And there's people with like whose lives are completely destroyed, and I'm not one of them. Like my problems are not really that deep.
mm,
Because like once you're like talking to like you experience a very real world when you do documentary, which LA has the problem, which is like a very hyper real world. Like it's a parody of itself. And it's really easy to think that your problems are the most important problems. No one has real problems. No one has a real job. No one, like, everyone you talk to is a creative, and you're like, what do people do here? Like, the class that's like the most, but like, I remember the biggest difference between New York and LA is that I go to the same yoga studio, and in New York, the classes start like at 5 a.m., like 4 a.m., I think classes start. And then at
oh,
like at 9, and then they start again after work. In LA, the earliest class, it's 7, sometimes 8. And the classes that are most packed are like the 1, 2 p.m. because like no one like has an actual job here. So it's very strange. And people are like, I don't know, like buying this $60 like Haley Bieber smoothie at Erewhon, and you're like, this place is crazy. So it's very easy to get caught up into bullshit problems and thinking that sure, like, oh no, I was doing this feature and like the director backed out, and now we're gonna lose funding, and I need to look for another director. And I'm like, but then at the end of the day, it's like, is that really, I don't know. Like you just talk to a woman who like left her kids behind to try to cross a jungle. Like it's like, okay, I don't really have
yeah,
problems. Um, so that's been
it's
really nice.
grounding, no?
Yeah,
Oh,
it's very, very grounding.
mm,
Um, and you just have to focus, which it's also like I think it depends on the person, but you have to focus on the good things, like on the nice things. It's quite easy for things to seem bleak when you do documentary as well. Um, but there's like a lot of like beauty with it. Like for example, in the Darien Gap documentary, like Necoclí is the last town people go to before they cross the Darien Gap. Then they go to like Capurganá, but not that town and stuff. Like there's this town in Bogota, in Colombia called Necoclí. It's where most migrants are like based before they cross. At times they have like it's a city with like 10,000 people and no infrastructure, but like sometimes there's over 100,000 migrants like camping over there. So like the hospitals are completely they shut down all the time. Like the city is not ready to handle that amount of people, and they're really at the forefront of like this migration path and crisis. But even then, you talk to people from the town, and they're all very supportive of the migrants in a very nice way. They're all like, "Well, we
Wow.
know they would be here if they wouldn't like. No one's doing this because they want to. Like we know that they're going through a horrible path, and they paint murals with the migrants that are like migrating is natural, like every animal does it, and like it's quite beautiful to see that people will support each other even in adversity. Um, because it's nice to see that rhetoric, especially right now when uh, like we live in a world that's increasingly more anti-migration and more like individualistic and more like sometimes it seems like we're going back, but it's nice to see that people still have a lot of humanity. So, um, but that's been really nice about the project. I forgot your question though. I think I did not quite answer it. Uh,
Was it about like, what difference? Ah,
Oh
yeah,
no,
if you like
it
more
was just like what
documentaries.
do you prefer to work on? But no, you kind
oh
of.
yeah, I
I mean,
love. I
from what
think
I took, you
both is
prefer
great.
documentaries. Yeah.
Yeah, I think doing both is really,
Yeah.
really great. Documentary always feels really nice. But there's something quite self-serving of like, which I love, is the whole reason that I started pursuing film about doing writing and directing something. I love that
Mm.
because I feel like if you're doing that, it's because you feel like you need to say something, like you need to say it. Like it's already such a pain to make it happen. So like you kind of just need to be like, I need to tell this story. So there's something quite nice about seeing that and doing that. There's something quite beautiful about like you see the end product and you're like, wow, like I had an idea in my head and now it's a reality. Like now, like for example, my last one, like it's this film that happens all of it like in this bathroom at a warehouse party, and it's very stylized and like it's a conversation about like desire being both a destructive and constructive force in our lives that we don't really control. But um I was just like I wrote this in the page and then suddenly like not only are all like we built this world from the ground up, like we constructed the bathroom, we like built everything in there, we created this world, and you're like, this was just an idea in my head, and 40 people came here to make it a reality. So that's always like kind of like, wow, I can't believe you get to do that. Like it's a privilege to get to do those kinds of things.
Uh, is it easy like to jump from producer, director, or writer, or no? Or I don't
I
know.
think roles that you should keep separate. I produce things I've directed, and I think that sucks. I think that's
Mm.
horrible. I think it's okay to switch from being a producer in one project to a director in another one. But if you're a producer and a director in the same project, I think you're at odds. Like you have priorities that are battling each other at different times. So that's a role that two different people should be doing. I'm never doing that again. Like that happened, and I was like, okay, for the next thing that I'm shooting right now, I'm gonna be meeting today later with another producer that's seen my work and is like, oh, I want to produce something of yours. And I'm like, good, because I need someone to produce this because I am done producing it myself. Um, Writer, I think writing is the most painful one. I think any writer will tell you. No, I'm not. I'm actually no. Some writers don't have problems with it, but some writers are crazy and can just write. But I think writing is incredibly painful. It's like 90% of it is just you staring at the computer without anything happening. And then
Mhm.
10% of you is like writing it, thinking it's good. And then you're like, oh, is this good? Is this horrible? Um, it's incredibly vulnerable. Like when you're sending it out for the first time for someone to read, you're always like, oh my God, am I actually the worst writer in the world? And then they read it and they're like, "Oh, I love that," and you're like, "Okay, no, like it's very
I
hard.
take that.
I think writing is the most vulnerable out of all of them.
Can
Um,
imagine.
but I love doing. I mean, I think all of them are really exciting and fun. All of them are really fun. Filmmaking is a team sport. I think that that's important. Anyone who wants to be a director out there needs to realize that's very important. It's not your movie, it's our movie. Like your job is to like find the right people to tell the story, like from someone who create the world build, like the production designer, to the cinematographer who like will help you build the visual language and the lighting, and who will like it's all a team sport. Like you're leading a team, you're not doing things on your own, which I think happens a lot of the time. Um, that's I've worked with directors who believe that they're the star, and I usually think that it's the worst kind of director. They're not usually very good. Because if you're not good at leading a team, then you're not. That is the job, to be honest. The job is to be
Mm.
the creative lead of the team, but it's a team sport. And producing allows you to see, which has been really great. It has allowed me to learn from a lot of directors as well in my own directing. Because you the producer is the one who makes it happen, is the one who like helps find the funds, helps organize the team, helps lead the day-to-day operations. But he gives feedback on the creative as well. But that whenever I'm on that role, whenever I'm in each one of those roles, I'm trying to peek and steal from other people what works for them and what doesn't work for them. So I think that
Mm.
being in different roles at times allows you to be like, oh, when I'm working with a director that I quite like, I'm like, oh, that's a great way of like talking to actors. Or sometimes you're just casting and I'm like, oh, this is a fun way to do casting exercises. I'll try to do that next time I'm casting something for something I'll direct. Um, so I think working on multiple things like that is useful. I think it's a thing you have to fight for because people like to put you in a box. And so it's sometimes at the beginning it was very difficult for me to direct something because they were like, "Well, you're a producer. What do you mean you're a writer? Do you want to write and direct things too? Because you produce." And I'm like, "No, no, no, but I can do both." And that
Yeah.
happens for everything. For example, being in fiction and nonfiction, it's also like I think now it's working because people are like accepting it that you have a lot of those things in your resume. By the beginning, they're like, what do you mean you want to do documentary? You work in fiction, like you can't work in documentary. Or like if you're
Mm.
like in working in film, I want to do like a commercial because commercials pay money. Like they're very different worlds and they don't want people to jump from one to the other. And I'm like, why are we also focused on putting each other in boxes? Like I think that complicates things.
Yeah.
Um, because it's like,
But
obviously,
I
I can do a commercial. Just pay me and I'll weaponize art. Like, just give me some money so I can do my art later. Um,
I think that happens in a lot of spaces.
yeah,
And
people
it's
love
even
putting people in boxes.
surprising that in art happens, People are usually more open-minded, but in the typical corporate industry, it's like super like that.
Yeah, no, I have a lot
Um,
of, for example, that will even do aliases. So if they're doing like a commercial, they're like, oh, I'll say that this is my name, and no one knows that with my other name, I'm doing like,
mm,
narrative work. Because if they find out, people will just be like, why are you here? Kind of.
hmm.
Um,
uh,
so I don't know why.
so
People need to get over that. We need to stop putting each other in boxes in all
right,
aspects of our lives. Like we need to stop doing.
definitely.
Yeah.
I fully support that. If you had like maybe from your experience and everything, like what type of advice would you give to someone who's interested in exploring these fields, no? Like filming and everything inside of it.
I think you need to love it. I think some people pursue it for the wrong reasons. It's not, it happens, but it's like 5% of the time that it's not glamorous at all. It's not, people think it's like, it is cool to do if you love it, but if you don't love it, it's not cool. Like it's actually like
Mm,
a lot of work. It doesn't pay very well. Like it's a sacrifice to want to pursue art. So you need to be willing to do that sacrifice. Some people are like have this idea of like, oh, I'm gonna do this because I wanna be a producer of like big movies and be walking red carpets and do all of those things. I think those are all the wrong reasons. It's like you need to love story. You need to want to like find some. What do you want to say? Um, I find a lot in LA. I've run into people who like have nothing to say, and I'm like, well, what are you trying to say with your films? What are you trying to do? And it's like, no, I just want to make a film. I think that that's like you need to find what you want to say. You need to know what you want to say, and you need to be willing to fight for it. Um, I'm not trying to discourage anyone from doing it because they should, but they must need to want to do it, like really want to do it. If you just want to be in the glamorous side of things, there's things that allow you to do that. You could be an agent, you can be a manager. They make a ton of money, agents, like a lot of money. And that is quite a glamorous job. But the best agents, even the best ones, like then will always be really good at story and will like find good scripts and give them to their talent and like things like that. So I think just love story and more than anything, just make things. Sometimes it feels like sure, like if you want to make a movie and you're like, oh, like I really want to shoot my script and yeah, I need $4 million to do it, like sure, that might be true. But you can also just be doing things that don't require $4 million for you to shoot constantly. So you can just pick up a camera, like start if you want to do documentary, that one's a very like low barrier of entry. Like you can start just like shooting little by little, but start doing shorts, shoot shorts with your friends, like make friends with artists and collaborate. I think that that's always like an important part. That is the best part of being in LA. Like I was like shedding on it by the fact that no one has a real job here, but that's also amazing here because like you're just constantly meeting like other dancers and stylists and like plastic artists. And then sometimes we're all just bored and like it happens to me all the time. Like I'm just like sitting there, and one time my friend called me and was like, oh, I have this camera package because I shot this thing and we have the camera for 3 extra days. Should we do something fun? It's like, oh yes. And then I called my friend who's a stylist and we're like, and two friends who are dancers, it's like, let's go to the desert and shoot like a little fashion film and we'll have like fabric flowing and like have someone write this like narrative piece to like do this poetic thing. Like it's always fun to just find collaborators. So just remember that it's a team sport and find people you want to play with pretty much is really important in film.
That sounds
Um,
so doable.
is like it's actually not like start writing sketches and put them on like YouTube. Like if I have friends right now with like a lot of like stand-up comedians who are like, okay, we're doing sketches and putting them up on TikTok, and suddenly like that leads to like actual jobs as well. Like I think the
Mm,
barrier of entry now with social media, with YouTube, with things, it's you can get exposure very easily. You just need to keep on doing your thing and showing people that you have something to say and that you're good. Also, the more you do, the better you are. Like no one is good
mm,
from the get-go. So just create. I think that that's the most important thing. The most valuable thing is just keep on creating and don't get discouraged. Like obviously, it's an industry where most of the things are no's. If you're doing anything on art, that's always how it's gonna be. It's a competitive. People will always, if you want to say something that's different from most things, then people are gonna be like, "What is that?" So there's a lot of no's. Be ready to face those and just keep on pushing forward. Um, don't don't be like an egomaniac, but you do have to drink your Kool-Aid a little bit. You need to be able to like realize that your art matters and that you have something to say and like stand behind it. Um, so, but yeah, I don't appreciate people who are crazy who are like, I'm God, which happens a lot too. And I think it's because people find that the easiest path of like being like they need to feel like they're the most important thing and the most important voice just because it's like easy to navigate that way. Like be humble, but also be assured of yourself. I think that
mm.
that's important.
Yeah. That kind of sums up everything you ought to be in everything in life. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's such a good message.
Yeah, but yeah, on that note, I think it's a good moment to wrap it up. It was highly influential, so I feel like adding like even more question, like another question is gonna like kind of kill the
Message.
momentum. I think yeah, like that was kind of I was like listening to you. I'm like yeah, I wanna do something in the audiovisual world now. Like
Yeah. It's so
yeah,
fun. It's a fun place. It's
yeah,
with sacrifices, but it for sure is fun.
yeah.
Um, I do go back home to my friends. Like I was like back at my friend's wedding, who I went to undergrad with in New Orleans. And it was like this 4-day wedding in Santa Marta, and everyone's in tech. Everyone like owns their house. Everyone is like, I was like, okay, this is very different. Like I chose a very different life, but I think it's worth it. Like just have fun. Like I'm always trying to have fun with what I do.
Mm,
And it's not always
that's
easy.
nice.
You need to
I wish
try.
my job was like that.
I mean, it's not all fun, but it should have some fun. Like the world's burning. Like let's at least have fun while it's burning. Like all you can do is
Literally.
Yeah,
dance a little bit, you know?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect.
Well, yeah, thank you so much, Nico, for the interview and for your experience and for talking to us today. We hope if we get like a great grade, we're gonna credit you in the, I don't know where, but we will,
At least
yeah,
part of it. Like one
yeah,
of the people who contributed.
yes.
Uh,
Yeah, I will say your name in my speech, my graduation speech. I'll
thank
say like, yeah, thank you. Yeah.
you.
Well, yeah, of course.
Better record it. Send
Thanks,
me one proof.
Nico.
Okay, okay. Yeah, of course. Thank you guys. Sorry that it was so late on your side.
No
We
worries, no
pulled it
worries.
off. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah,
good that we
yeah.
did it.
I think we have good content. Like,
Yeah.
Okay, guys, have a good night. I'm gonna go start my day. Okay.
yeah,
Okay,
you
Nico, thanks
too.
so much. And we'll keep in
Bye.
touch.
Ciao.
And thanks for the
Yeah.
space.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye. Thank you.
Ciao.